Well, today we're going to talk about a unicorn car. And as you're looking at this picture of a brown 1985 Oldsmobile 98 Regency Brougham, you're probably saying to yourself, how in the world is this a unicorn car? They sold almost 200,000 of these 1985 Oldsmobile 98 Broughams. They're relatively common, or at least they once were. Well, just hold off on that for 1 second, because this is a very special Oldsmobile 98 Regency Brougham because it has an option that was a one-year only option, and many people didn't check the box for it. So we're going to take a look in a few minutes under hood and see what I'm discussing. But first, a few little blurbs about this 1985 Oldsmobile 98 Regency Brougham from the outside. And you can see here from this rear three-quarter view that the Olds 98 was in some ways trying to emulate Cadillac, those vertical tail lamps that had been a signature all the way back to 1963 for the Oldsmobile 98. Began back then because General Motors divisions were to some degree trying to copy Cadillac and give these vehicles a little bit of that baby Cadillac feel. After all, they were the most expensive vehicles of the time, and at least for the divisions. And well, what's wrong with copying the most expensive in the General Motors stable, Cadillac? That is truly why Oldsmobile 98s had vertical style tail lamps for many years, all the way till the end of the run. Now, 1985 was the first year for this downsized front-wheel drive, full-size C-body car. The Olds 98 was all new for this year, and it was on the same platform as the Buick Electra and the Cadillac DeVille and Fleetwood. And the next year, the H-bodies would come out. That would be the Buick LeSabre, the Olds 88, or Delta 88, and the Pontiac Bonneville would be off of the H-bodies. That would come out in 1987. So this was really the first time General Motors had made a full-size, transversely mounted engine and transmission front-wheel drive vehicle. Yes, they did have, let's say, some big front-wheel drive cars before, like the Tornados, Eldorados, even the Rivieras after 1979, but they didn't have a complete lineup, and they didn't have a transversely mounted engine and transmission series of vehicles. All those vehicles that I mentioned of yesteryear, the big full-size front-wheel drive cars, the engines and transmissions were mounted longitudinally under hood. Now, as we return to the front of this particular Olds 98 Regency Brougham, you'll also see that kind of pseudo egg crate-y texture grille on the Olds 98. It's not quite an egg crate here. It's more rectangular, but it's emulating it. And that was, again, a hallmark of the Oldsmobile 98s, in particular the 98s, not the 88s. Most people don't notice the grille texture differences and those minor things between the 88 and 98 of these years because the cars look relatively similar. They do have different C-pillars, but the front ends look quite similar. But the 98s had that egg crate grille texture for many years, again, because who had it? Cadillac. So something for you to be aware of is just all those little areas where Oldsmobile was trying to emulate Cadillac on this, their most expensive vehicle. Now, this car does have some optional equipment that you can see in these photos. Cornering lights, clearly you can see there at the bottom of the front fender. It also has the luggage rack, which you saw out back, and it has the faux wire wheel covers, which I don't know if I am in love with the latter, but somebody paid for some good optional equipment here. And this car also displays a very typical General Motors design trait of the era. Now notice the very vertical C-pillar there, and you have a very GM-y trait of the day, which is that the front fender terminates at a relative high point compared to the belt line on the doors. Notice the belt line at the doors is lower than where the fender ends. That was a very GM-style thing to do during the time frame. And it did give you more glass area, made the cabin feel very roomy. When you're sitting in one of these cars, it's amazing because, especially by today, they're relatively small. And you have this sense of openness and airiness. And also the cars are sitting quite low because they are relative to today. So when you pull up next to a big heavy-duty truck or something like that, you feel very exposed. But back in this time frame, trucks and SUVs were being driven by people who actually needed them in general for work as opposed to just drove them as everyday cars. So when you drive this car in traffic, you have beautiful sight lines. It's very open and airy, but you also feel somewhat exposed just because of how low the car is to the ground and how small it is now relative to everything else. I mean, this was a full-size car back in the day, And now it's, kind of the size of a Chevrolet Malibu, Toyota Camry, something in that zip code. And last, on the exterior here, you can see this very linear kind of form for these Oldsmobile 98s and that vertical C-pillar that emulated the 1976 to 79 Seville. And that was very typical of General Motors design during that time frame, arguably overused even. They had that formal C-pillar and everything. But you know what? These cars actually sold very well, particularly in this first model year. This was the best-selling Olds 98 to date. Many people don't know that, but in 1985, they sold almost 200,000 of these. It was a runaway success for that particular model year. Yes, it was a bit of an extended model year, but still, this car was unquestionably successful. And of course, you have a 98 trademark, those wide rocker moldings at the bottom there that are helping make the body look even a little bit more slim and dressing it up. And now let's rotate to the interior, where this interior design on this Olds 98 is very understated, and yet I think it's pretty luxurious as well. This is the 98 Regency Brougham that has the up-level interior, although the base 98 had an interesting interior too. Both had loose cushion style seating, and that was really started with the 1972 Oldsmobile 98 Regency, when Oldsmobile's division chief, John Beltz, had asked lead interior designer Blaine Jenkins what he could do with $100 to gussy up the 98 interior, and he came up with the Olds 98 Regency. And so the 98 would continue with this loose cushion style seating in these years, and they're very comfortable seats. Obviously no lateral support, but they do have some lumbar support, and they are very comfortable places to sit for extended drives. Now you'll notice the 98, as opposed to the 88, had this fake wood grain on the door panels and the dash. The 88 had like a brushed aluminum look, which I actually think looks a bit better. But the materials here are quite good. The top of the door panel is, let's say, I don't want to call it carpeted. It's got fabric. It's got a fabric top part of the panel. The lower portion is carpeted. And it's all soft touch materials except that faux wood grain area with the casket pull door handle. So not a cheap door panel. As we rotate around to the passenger side, you can see that faux wood grain that adorns the dash humorously. It's even on the vents. I think that's pretty funny. I don't know why designers put it on the vents. Clearly, you wouldn't have those trimmed in real wood grain, but oh well. It looks pretty handsome. Got the block lettering for Oldsmobile there. The glove box on these is quite small. If I had to pick at something on the interior, I'd pick at that. And also the ergonomics are not great. I mean, you can imagine you're sitting in the driver's seat and you want to change the radio station, how far the reach is. It was not a great ergonomic design. This car, by the way, does have some pieces of optional equipment that you can see here, and one of which is the automatic climate control. This was not a fully automatic climate control. It was a semi-automatic setup where you controlled the fan speed and the mode, but it would control the temperature. And I think by this point, that was a cost savings and something that customers also liked. I don't think they liked the fully automatic climate control in some cases where it also selected where the air was coming out and the fan speed. They wanted some control over that. And then in the middle there, the astute GM observer will notice something about the radio as well as the door panels. And that is that this car has the optional Bose radio. Yes, you could get a Bose radio. You could tell by that silver face on the radio and the larger speakers in the doors. So I should say the speakers in the doors, period. If you just had the regular radio, your Olds 98, you got the speakers in the dash. You can see the speaker grills for that. So the Bose radios were pretty good. Not as good as they are now. Actually, the base GM radios were really good in this era. You can also spot the automatic dimming day-night mirror up in the middle of the windshield. And I will just point out something. Notice the A-pillars on these are trimmed in fabric as well. So you got fuzzy A-pillars when you got your Olds 98. No plastic A-pillars here in your luxury car. And here's a better picture of that automatic climate control. You can see that you could manually select the mode. The temperature, though, was something that was automatically done, and the fan speed control there is on the right. Beneath, you can kind of make out the Bose symbol. It says Delco Bose there on the clock face. This car does not have the optional gauge package, just has the idiot lights, and it does have the optional trip odometer. So quite a few different things. I do like how Oldsmobile had this vacuum form stitched upper padded dash. It's not real stitching there, but it looks convincing. And I like how they made the upper and the lower two-tone. That's just something they don't do much anymore, the two-toning of the interiors. I mean, most everything is this black solidified lava. But here you actually got two different colors on the interior, and I think the tan and brown combination actually looks very tasteful. And as we go to the rear seats, you also notice that these cars had quite a bit of room on the interior. There's quite a bit of leg room back here. The bottom bolsters and the rear seats are quite lengthy. So it was a comfortable place to sit and take family trips back in the day. The other thing I'll point out is notice the window divider that is in the rear door to kind of help that rear glass go down into the door. Humorously, the rear glass on these only goes down a little more than halfway despite the window divider. So what in the world is this window divider doing placed incorrectly? It could have been placed further forward in the car and allowing the glass to go all the way down. Well, GM designers like to place the window dividers where they thought they looked the best, not where they were the most functional. And so you get what you got. In other words, that the rear window glass didn't go all the way down. It doesn't really bother me because it's still a pretty wide opening, but could bother some people. And in most cars, let's say in the 70s at least, the rear window glass does go down. But just something humorous about GM design and these rear window glass divider placements. Okay, and now we're going to get to the real reason I wanted to show this car, and that is what's under hood. This is the 1 year only, at least in the C-bodies. This was available for other years, but in the C-body, it was only available in 1985. And take a look at the air cleaner snorkel there. Can you see what it says? V6 diesel. That's right. This is a diesel-powered Olds 98. Like I said, available only in 1985. This is a 4.3-liter V6 diesel that made 85 horsepower at 165 pound-feet of torque. Now, 4.3-liter V6 diesel, what in the world is this? Well, this is the Oldsmobile 350 cubic inch diesel with two cylinders lopped off, to some degree, not really. Oldsmobile had learned their lesson a bit by this point, and they introduced this 4.3-liter V6 diesel in 1982, I believe. You could get it in the A-body cars like the Cutlass Sierra from Oldsmobile, Buick Century, etc. And it wasn't just a dieselized gas engine. There was no Olds 4.3-liter V6 gas engine. This was, from the ground up, designed to be a diesel. They did base it on the Olds 350 block with a few cylinders lopped off. But they did learn a bit from the previous failings of the 350 cubic inch diesel. And what is one of the main things they learned? Well, this has a water separator. Actually, the sticker on the air cleaner is talking about how to purge the fuel filter there of water. So a lot better fuel filtration system on these 4.3-liter V6 diesels. For whatever reason, the old 350 diesel never got a water separator. And that was a shame because then it chewed up internals in the injection pump and created a bunch of issues. That was one thing that was pretty egregious and a big omission that Oldsmobile and the other GM divisions should have insisted upon with the other diesels they made. But here you have a better fuel filtration system, probably not the most optimal, but better than what was in the Olds 350 diesels. And then they did do things to strengthen up the internals in the 4.3-liter V6 diesel so that it became more reliable than than the Olds 350 V8 diesel. Now, these still did have some issues. For whatever reason, they tended to blow intake gaskets, and they still, in some cases, blew head gaskets, but they were better. And I will say that they did deliver excellent fuel economy. I mean, this car has a 4-speed automatic attached to this 4.3-liter V6 diesel. I would not be surprised if this got in the high 30s, maybe even touching 40 miles per gallon on the freeway. The 3-speed diesels in the A-bodies, the ones with the 3-speed automatic, used to get in the mid to high 30s. And this one probably gets about the same, if not a little more, because of the overdrive transmission. And these cars are pretty light. They're not overly heavy. And they're in about 3,200, 3,300 pounds. So they did get good fuel economy, that is for certain. And interestingly on these, 4.3-liter V6 diesel had the serpentine belt that you can see here. You can also notice the rotary-style compressor, the air conditioning compressor that's packaged there next to the air cleaner. I think the packaging was pretty tight on these because of the 90-degree bank angle, although the V6 engine that was in here also had a 90-degree bank angle. That was the Buick V6 that was based off of a V8 way back when it was introduced in 1962. I do enjoy the little breather cap that's also the oil fill cap there. The fact that this engine is painted the Oldsmobile, what would you call it? Tealy, silvery metallic. And, it's definitely makes this car something unique. Now, unfortunately, in 1985, this was also the first year of the GM 440 T4 transmission, the transversely mounted automatic transmission. And they had a considerable amount of failures. It was actually something that delayed the introduction of this car, was the transmission durability issues. It was just pretty abysmal. And so I would generally recommend people stay away from these first year 1985 full-size C bodies. I'd actually say that you're best to get one from 1988 and later. By that point, the transmissions are great. You have the 3800 engine with the balance shaft as opposed to just the even firing 3.8 liter V6 with no balance shaft. 88 and later, these cars are, excellent cars in general. There still are some issues like the window regulators and the tape drive mechanisms there, but the powertrains are pretty gosh darn reliable. In 85, no, 86 is better, 87 is better yet, 88, I think they finally got all the issues out. Now, I have to say, I'd love to have this car just to show on the channel in running order and for the curiosity factor. Imagine pulling up to the diesel pump with this. But the seller is asking, I think, way too much money, almost $10,000 for this thing. It's got 59,000 miles, so it's a low mileage car. It looks like it's in pristine shape, but I just can't imagine that anybody's going to pay that for one of these curiosity cars. If it were $5,000 or $6,000, something in that zip code, it'd probably be on a trailer home to me at the moment. So we'll see what ends up happening and what he ends up wanting. Because it would just be fun to drive. Nobody's got one of these things. And if it breaks down at that price and you can't fix it, parts for this thing are impossible to find now. And so if something catastrophic breaks, you might be out of luck. But at that price, who cares? It would just be fun to show all of you. So we'll see what happens. But I wanted to at least show this to you because I think it's one of these real unicorn cars. And as a bonus feature, here's a sketch from a designer on this Olds 98 program, John Manoogian, of what he thought the Olds 98 could look like. Now notice the skirted rear wheel, very Olds 9080, and the egg crate-ish grille up front, again, very Olds 9080. And you can see there's quite a few similarities to the final production car here, although the wheels and tires are a lot larger. But the toothpick A-pillars and that large glass section, the belt line on the door, below the hood, there's some things that are quite similar. And I think it's a handsome proposal overall. Now, John has started writing a series of articles about his career that are extremely interesting. I'll put a link in the comment section so you can take a look for yourself and get some insights into GM design. And also be sure to check out the interview with John that I will post at the end of this video, because I think it's pretty sweet on the design of this Olds 98, so you can see more of these sketches. Thanks again for watching.